I am Zuri, 33 years old, and a forensic accountant by trade. I spend my days tracking down corporate fraud, yet somehow I remained blind to the ultimate scam running inside my own family. Last week, my parents thought they could steal my life savings to fund my sister's lavish lifestyle. My mother actually looked me in the eye and said, "We added your sister to your account so she can access your $160,000 portfolio to help her husband's startup." She expected me to cry or beg. Instead, I smiled, took a sip of wine, and said, "That is funny because I cashed it all out. There is only $9.50 left." I had no idea that within 48 hours my brother-in-law would be in handcuffs and my parents would face foreclosure. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you have ever faced family members who severely underestimated your worth and intelligence. Growing up in an affluent, predominantly black neighborhood in Atlanta, my parents, Marcus and Brenda, were obsessed with image. Our sprawling brick home with its manicured lawn was a fortress of expectations I never cared to meet. I was the pragmatic, quiet daughter who preferred spreadsheets to social climbing. My younger sister, Kiara, however, was the golden child. At 30 years old, she was a walking, talking internet filter who never held a real job. She knew exactly how to play the victim and manipulate my parents into funding her luxury handbags and European vacations. Her crowning achievement in my parents' eyes was marrying Bradley. Bradley was a 32-year-old white man who described himself as a tech startup chief executive and visionary. To Marcus and Brenda, Bradley was the golden ticket that elevated our family's social standing. They practically worshipped the ground he walked on. It did not matter that his business never seemed to produce an actual product, or that his grand entrepreneurial pitches were just word salads made up of empty corporate jargon. They treated him like royalty, while I was treated like the family's personal cash machine and built-in disappointment. The sheer toxicity of our family dynamic reached its absolute peak last Friday evening. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, and they were hosting an extravagant catered dinner at their home. I arrived straight from my office, still wearing my tailored gray suit, exhausted from a grueling week of investigating a massive corporate embezzlement case. The moment I walked through the heavy oak double doors, the suffocating atmosphere of their pretension hit me. The dining room table was draped in imported silk, overflowing with crystal glasses and expensive floral arrangements. Kiara and Bradley were already holding court in the living room. Kiara was draped in a designer silk dress that cost more than her monthly rent, practically glowing under the attention of my doting parents. Bradley was swirling a glass of expensive scotch, leaning against the fireplace mantel like he owned the entire estate. "Zuri, you finally made it," my mother said, her tone dripping with that familiar patronizing edge. "Still wearing those stiff, boring suits, I see. Your sister spent 3 hours getting ready." "I was working, Mom," I replied evenly, handing her a beautifully wrapped gift box containing a crystal vase. "Some of us actually have to earn our paychecks." Kiara let out a dramatic sigh, clinging tighter to Bradley's arm. "Oh, Zuri, always so bitter and obsessed with money. You really need to learn how to relax. Bradley and I just got back from a wellness retreat in Tulum. It does wonders for the soul. You should try it. Maybe you would finally find a man who can tolerate you." "A wellness retreat sounds lovely for people who do not have to worry about running an actual business," I countered smoothly, taking my seat at the far end of the dining table. Bradley chuckled, an arrogant sound that always grated on my nerves. "Business is about vision, Zuri. You accountants just crunch numbers in the background. You do not see the big picture. My new application is going to revolutionize the digital networking space. We are entering our funding round and the valuation is going to be astronomical, but you know it takes capital to make capital." My father, Marcus, nodded vigorously, raising his glass to Bradley. "That is exactly right, son. You are a true visionary. Not like Zuri here, hoarding her little savings account and living like a miser. A real family supports each other's visions." I ignored the jab, focusing on my plate as the catered dinner was served. The conversation flowed over me, an endless stream of my parents praising Bradley's imaginary business acumen and Kiara's flawless taste in interior design. I was used to being the scapegoat, the dry, unlovable spinster who served only to make Kiara look brighter by comparison. But I had no idea that their relentless need to elevate Bradley was about to cross a criminal line. As dessert was being served, my mother tapped her spoon against her crystal champagne flute. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the dining room. She stood up, her face flushed with excitement and pride. "Marcus and I have a very special announcement to make," Brenda declared, beaming at Kiara and Bradley. "As you all know, Bradley's incredible tech startup is on the verge of a massive breakthrough. He needs a quick, short-term injection of capital to secure his new office space and finalize his funding round. And as a family, we believe in supporting our own." I frowned, looking up from my coffee. "That is generous of you, Mom. I hope you and Dad are not taking out another mortgage to fund this." My father sneered at me. "We do not need to, Zuri, because you are going to be helping your sister and her husband." I set my fork down, staring at my father in complete bewilderment. Help them? I had never offered a single dime of my hard-earned savings to anyone in this room. My mother stepped in, her smile wide and painful. "We did not want to bother you with the administrative details, Zuri. We know how much you hate paperwork, so your father and I took care of it. We went down to the bank and used that old custodial guardianship paperwork from when you were 17. The bank manager is a dear friend from church, and he helped us add Kiara as a joint account holder on your investment portfolio. Now she can access your $160,000 to give Bradley the bridge loan his company needs." The sheer audacity of her statement hung in the air. They had actually committed financial fraud, manipulating a decades-old document to hijack my life savings. Before I could even formulate a response to this staggering betrayal, Bradley leaned forward, resting his elbows on the imported silk tablecloth. He offered me a patronizing, tight-lipped smile that made my skin crawl. "Listen, Zuri. I know this might seem sudden, but in the fast-paced world of tech startups, agility is everything. We are talking about a massive paradigm shift in user engagement. My platform is going to completely disrupt the industry. The synergistic potential is off the charts, but we need scalable capital to pivot our marketing strategy before the Series A funding closes. I am basically letting you in on the ground floor of a unicorn. You should be thanking us. Most people would kill for pre-IPO equity in a venture like this." I just stared at him. He was spouting meaningless buzzwords, stringing together corporate jargon to mask the fact that he was stealing my money. But he was not finished. He took a sip of his scotch and gestured toward me with his glass. "Honestly, Zuri, you sit at a desk all day looking at boring spreadsheets. Forensic accounting is so reactive. You are just tracking what other visionary people have already done. I am out here creating wealth, building a legacy for this family. By absorbing your portfolio into my capital stack, I am giving your stagnant money a chance to actually mean something. I am guaranteeing you a 5% return once our venture capital clears. You are welcome, by the way. I could have gone to any angel investor in Silicon Valley, but I wanted to keep this wealth generation within the family." My parents looked at him as if he had just parted the Red Sea. My father pounded the table in agreement. "Do you hear that, Zuri? That is how a real business mind operates. Bradley is elevating this entire family. You have been sitting on that money for years, acting like a miser, refusing to upgrade your lifestyle or help your sister. It is frankly embarrassing how small-minded you are. You have no husband, no children, and no legacy. What were you even saving that money for? A fancy retirement home for one." My mother nodded enthusiastically, her diamond earrings catching the chandelier light. "Your father is right, Zuri. You should be down on your knees thanking Bradley for taking your boring little nest egg and turning it into generational wealth. He is doing you a massive favor. You have always been so selfish with your success, keeping every penny to yourself, while your sister struggles to maintain a lifestyle suitable for a chief executive officer's wife. We had to step in and make the right decision for the family." Kiara leaned into Bradley, resting her perfectly manicured hand on his chest. Her engagement ring, a massive diamond that I now strongly suspected was purchased with fraudulent funds, sparkled under the dining room lights. "Exactly, Zuri," Kiara chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "You really need to see the bigger picture here. Bradley is doing the heavy lifting for all of us. He is out there grinding, making connections with important people, and elevating our family name. You just sit in a cubicle doing math for a living. It is so depressing. We are trying to pull you into the modern era of wealth building. When Bradley's company goes public, you will finally have enough money to buy yourself a decent wardrobe and maybe hire a stylist. You really should be grateful we thought of you at all. I looked around the table at the four of them. My father Marcus puffing out his chest with unearned pride. My mother Brenda gazing adoringly at her white son-in-law as if he were a deity. Kiara basking in the stolen glow of my hard work. And Bradley, the supposed tech genius, nursing his drink with a sickeningly smug expression on his face. They had plotted this behind my back. They had used their social connections at our local church to bypass banking security protocols, committing outright theft under the guise of parental authority, all to fund the delusions of a man who spoke entirely in hollow buzzwords. My father pointed his steak knife directly at me, his tone brooking no argument. I do not want to hear a single word of complaint from you, Zuri. We are family, and family protects its own. Your mother and I sacrificed everything to raise you, and it is about time you paid it forward. Bradley needs that capital by tomorrow morning to secure his downtown office space. He has already started writing the checks to his contractors based on that portfolio. This is a done deal. The sheer entitlement radiating from them was suffocating. They truly believed I would just roll over and accept this violation. They thought my quiet demeanor meant I was weak, that my dedication to my career meant I was clueless. They spent their lives underestimating my intelligence. Tonight will cost them absolutely everything they have. I leaned back in my chair, the plush velvet of the dining seat pressing against my spine, and looked at the four faces staring back at me. They were waiting for the breakdown. They expected the tears, the desperate pleading, the complete emotional collapse that had defined my childhood whenever they backed me into a corner. My father's chest was still puffed out in triumph. My mother wore a mask of benevolent pity. Kiara was already looking at her phone, bored by the victory. Bradley took a smug, self-satisfied sip of his scotch. The silence stretched across the dining room, heavy and expectant. And then I laughed. It did not start as a chuckle. It was a full, loud, genuine laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceilings and rattled the crystal glasses on the table. I laughed so hard my ribs ached, the sheer absurdity of their master plan finally hitting me. "What is so funny?" my father demanded, his face instantly darkening from pride to fury. He hated losing control of a room. "Are you having a hysterical breakdown, Zuri? Stop making a scene at your mother's anniversary dinner." Kiara rolled her eyes and crossed her arms over her chest. "She is just jealous, Dad. She cannot handle the fact that Bradley is actually doing something meaningful with that money while she just sits around being miserable." I took a deep breath, wiping a genuine tear of mirth from the corner of my eye. I reached into my tailored suit jacket, pulled out my smartphone, and tossed it carelessly onto the center of the silk tablecloth. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud right next to the floral centerpiece. "You all seem to have forgotten what I actually do for a living," I said, my voice dropping its amusement and adopting the cold, clinical tone I used in corporate interrogations. "I am a forensic accountant. I track missing money. I dismantle complex financial frauds designed by Wall Street executives who are 10 times smarter than anyone sitting at this table. Did you really think a small-town bank manager and a forged signature could outsmart me?" My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, casting a nervous glance at Bradley. "Zuri, watch your tone. Pastor Thomas is a good man and he assured us the paperwork was completely legal since we were your original guardians." I shook my head, feeling a surge of absolute clarity. "Pastor Thomas is an idiot who is about to lose his banking license and face federal charges. You see, Mom, when you have $160,000 in a high-yield investment portfolio, the bank does not just let someone waltz in and add a new name without triggering security protocols. The system is automated." At exactly 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, when Pastor Thomas bypassed standard procedure to add Kiara to my account, a major red flag went up in the bank's Central Fraud Division. And because I am a high-net-worth client with priority banking status, my personal wealth manager called me at exactly 9:15. The color began to drain from Bradley's face. He set his scotch glass down on the table, his knuckles turning white. "What do you mean they called you?" he asked, his voice losing its arrogant edge. "I mean, they called me to verify if I had authorized my sister, someone with a credit score hovering around 500 and a history of defaulted loans, to access my portfolio," I explained, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the table. "I told them absolutely not. Then, I spent the next 48 hours executing a complete financial lockdown. I did not just freeze the account. I liquidated every single stock, bond, and mutual fund in that portfolio. I paid the early withdrawal penalties in cash because ensuring you got nothing was worth every single penny." My father stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. "You cannot do that. That money was already designated for Bradley's business. We signed the papers." I smiled, looking up at him with absolute calm. "You signed papers for an account that no longer holds any assets. Before you even sat down for this lovely dinner tonight, my lawyers transferred the entire liquidated portfolio into an ironclad private trust. It is an offshore entity, protected by biometric security and layers of legal encryption that not even a team of federal judges could easily breach. Pastor Thomas cannot touch it. You cannot touch it. And Bradley certainly cannot touch it. You tried to steal my future, so I legally erased the money from your reality." Kiara was breathing heavily, her manicured nails digging into the tablecloth. "No, no, no, you are lying. Bradley checked the account status yesterday afternoon. He said the routing numbers were active and the funds were pending." I tapped the screen of my phone, bringing up the banking application, and pushed it across the table toward my sister. "The routing numbers are active because I legally cannot close the account while a fraud investigation is pending against Pastor Thomas. But the funds, go ahead, Kiara. Look at the screen. Read the available balance to your brilliant visionary husband. Tell him how much scalable capital he has to disrupt the industry." Kiara grabbed the phone, her eyes darting across the bright digital display. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Bradley in sheer panic, then back at the screen. "Read it," I commanded, my voice slicing through the room like a blade. $9, Kiara whispered, her voice trembling. $9.50. I picked up my wine glass and took a slow, deliberate sip. "Exactly. $9.50. Feel free to withdraw it tomorrow morning, Kiara. You can buy yourself and the tech genius here 2 large iced coffees to celebrate your massive paradigm shift. Assuming, of course, that the local barista accepts completely worthless money from broke fraudsters." The room plunged into a suffocating, unbearable silence. For 3 agonizing, painfully long seconds, no one moved. The illusion of their unearned superiority hung suspended in the stale air. Then the crushing reality of my words crashed down, shattering the tense atmosphere into pure, uncontrollable panic. The physical transformation in Bradley was truly spectacular to witness. The arrogant, overconfident tech bro who lectured me about generational wealth just minutes earlier had completely vanished. In his place sat a terrified, hyperventilating, exposed fraud. All the color drained from his face, leaving his skin an unhealthy, pale ashen gray. A thick layer of sweat broke out across his forehead, gleaming under the expensive crystal chandelier. He stared at my phone screen as if staring hard enough could manifest the missing $159,000. Kiara was the first to break the silence. She dropped my phone onto the tablecloth like it burned her. She turned to her husband, her voice hitting a shrill, hysterical pitch. "Tell me she is lying, Bradley. Tell me this is just one of her sick, jealous games. You said the money was secure. You told me the capital was locked in for the firm." Bradley did not answer her. He could not. His chest heaved with erratic breaths. His hands trembled so violently, his whiskey glass rattled against the table. He reached up, tugging frantically at his designer silk tie as if it were suddenly strangling him. My mother leaped up, her socialite facade crumbling into desperate rage. "Zuri, you stop this nonsense right now. You log back into whatever application you used and you put that money back. Do you hear me? You are going to ruin your sister's marriage and destroy this family's reputation over a petty tantrum. Fix this immediately. You are not leaving this table until that account is fully funded." I remained perfectly still watching them unravel without breaking eye contact. Mom, I cannot put the money back. The private trust requires a 30-day waiting period and dual authorization for any withdrawal. That money is locked away in a financial fortress. It is legally untouchable. A strange, choked sound escaped Bradley's throat. It was half gasp, half sob. He slumped forward, burying his face in his trembling hands. The sound was so pathetic that even my father, who had been shouting about respect and family duty all night, froze in his tracks. Marcus stared at his golden son-in-law, a dawn of horrific realization creeping across his features. "Bradley," my father demanded, his voice stripped of its earlier warmth. "Why are you sweating like that? It is just a delay. We will hire a lawyer tomorrow and force the bank to reverse her unauthorized transfer. We will get the capital." "I already wrote the checks," Bradley whispered, the words muffled behind his hands. The room went dead silent again. Kiara grabbed his shoulder, shaking him roughly. "What checks? What are you talking about?" Bradley raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed and darting frantically around the room like a cornered animal. "I wrote the checks, Kiara. I wrote them yesterday afternoon. The commercial landlord required a 6-month deposit for the downtown office lease. My lead developer threatened to quit if I did not cover the outstanding invoices for the beta testing. I wrote one check for $85,000 and another for $70,000. I used the routing number from that joint account because Pastor Thomas assured me the funds were pending and would clear by tomorrow morning." My mother let out a blood-curdling shriek. My father stumbled backward, clutching the edge of the dining table as if the floor had dropped out from beneath him. "You wrote $155,000 in checks against an account that only has $9 in it," Marcus roared, the veins in his neck bulging. "Are you insane? Do you know what the commercial real estate firm will do when that check bounces tomorrow?" "They will not just bounce," I interjected, my voice cutting through the hysteria like a scalpel. I stood up, slowly pushing my chair back with a deliberate scraping sound against the hardwood floor. I smoothed the wrinkles from my gray suit and walked calmly toward the hallway to retrieve my coat. My parents and sister were too busy screaming at Bradley to stop me. I slipped my arms into my trench coat, adjusting the collar as I turned back to face the dining room. The scene was a masterpiece of poetic justice. Kiara was sobbing hysterically, smearing her expensive makeup across her face while pounding her fists against Bradley's chest. My father was clutching his head, pacing frantically and muttering about his reputation. My mother was hyperventilating, leaning heavily against the wall. "Listen to me very carefully, Bradley," I said, raising my voice just enough to command the room. Everyone froze, turning their desperate, terrified eyes toward me. "You did not just write a bad check for groceries. You wrote 6 figures in fraudulent checks against an account you did not legally own, using funds you did not actually possess to secure commercial real estate and pay corporate contractors. In the financial sector, we call that check kiting. The federal government calls it bank fraud." Bradley whimpered, his arrogant facade completely obliterated. "I did not mean to. I thought the money was guaranteed. You cannot let them arrest me, Zuri. Please. You know the law. You have to help me fix this." "I do know the law," I replied, stepping toward the doors. "That is exactly why I know writing a bad check over a certain threshold elevates the crime to a felony. Under federal statutes, bank fraud carries a penalty of up to 30 years in prison. Since you used a federally insured institution, the FBI will have absolute jurisdiction the second that landlord reports the bounced check." "Zuri, please," my mother cried out. "You are her sister. You have the money. You can wire it to the landlord. If he goes to prison, Kiara loses everything." "Kiara has nothing to lose except a fraudulent lifestyle funded by a con artist," I corrected coldly. "You all made your choices. You chose to steal from me. You chose to violate my trust. You chose to mock my career, the very same career that gave me the skills to see this scam coming a mile away. I owe you absolutely nothing." I pulled open the front door, letting the cool, crisp night air sweep into the stifling, toxic atmosphere of my parents' home. Behind me, the screaming resumed. Kiara was wailing about her ruined reputation. Marcus was shouting at Bradley, demanding to know how he could be so stupid. Brenda was crying out to the Lord for a miracle. They were drowning in the exact same chaos they had tried to push onto me. "Enjoy your anniversary, Mom and Dad," I said, not bothering to look back. And Bradley, I highly suggest you use that $9.50 to buy yourself a very good cup of coffee tomorrow morning. You are going to need the caffeine when the federal authorities show up at your door. I walked out into the driveway, the heavy oak doors slamming shut behind me, sealing them inside their self-made nightmare. I climbed into my car, started the engine, and drove away without a single ounce of regret. The morning sun filtered through my downtown Atlanta office windows, casting shadows across the mahogany desk. It was barely 7 in the morning on Wednesday, the day after my parents' disastrous anniversary dinner. The city below was just waking up to rush hour, but I had been at my desk for an hour. The silence here was absolute, a sharp contrast to the chaotic screaming I left behind in my parents' driveway. I took a slow sip of my black coffee, the bitter warmth grounding me. My workspace was my sanctuary. Two massive curved monitors illuminated my face with the crisp light of financial data. As a senior forensic accountant, my days were built on logic, numbers, and irrefutable proof. Emotions were liabilities. Data was absolute. I was preparing to dive into my caseload when my phone shattered the quiet. The caller identification displayed my father's name. Marcus was calling. I did not answer immediately. I took another measured sip of coffee, allowing the phone to ring 3 times. I needed to ensure my recording software was fully operational. In my line of work, undocumented conversations were as useless as bounced checks. I tapped the record icon on my secondary secure device, confirming the red light was pulsing before answering. I put him on speakerphone, placing the device on the desk. "Good morning, Dad," I said, keeping my tone entirely devoid of emotion. I did not even finish before his voice exploded through the speaker so loud that the audio clipped. "Do not you dare good morning me, Zuri. You fix this right now. Do you hear me? You log into your computer and you wire that $160,000 directly to the commercial leasing office immediately." He was hyperventilating, his breathing ragged over the line. I leaned back in my chair. "I already explained the trust to you last night. The funds are legally locked. And even if they were not, I am not financing Bradley's fraudulent business ventures." My father let out a guttural sound of pure rage. "Bradley is not a fraud. He is your brother-in-law, and he is a visionary who hit a minor cash flow problem. You set him up to fail. You knew Pastor Thomas helped us adjust that account, and you deliberately pulled the rug out from under us to humiliate your sister." He was projecting, twisting reality to avoid his own complicity in bank fraud. "You listen to me, you ungrateful girl," Marcus snarled, his voice dropping into a menacing growl. "If you do not transfer that money by noon today, I will destroy you. I will go to Pastor Thomas and stand up in front of the congregation this Sunday. I will tell every single family exactly what kind of vindictive, jealous, heartless woman you really are. Everyone will know you tried to send her husband to federal prison out of spite. Your reputation in Atlanta will be absolute garbage. No decent person will ever associate with you again." He continued his tirade, throwing out biblical quotes about honoring parents and the sins of greed. I let him scream. I let the recording capture every single thread of extortion and character assassination. While his voice echoed off the glass walls of my office, I moved my mouse and clicked open my firm's proprietary financial database access. I typed in the name of Bradley's supposed tech startup. The search engine spun before retrieving the corporate tax filings, state registration documents, and public financial disclosures. My eyes scanned the data cascading across my left monitor. My father was still yelling about family loyalty, but my focus was absorbed by the staggering financial incompetence displayed on my screen. Bradley had registered his business as a limited liability company in Delaware, but he was sloppy. He used the same registered agent for 3 other shell companies. I pulled up the tax filings for the previous fiscal year. The company claimed 0 revenue, no product sales, no software licensing fees, nothing. I cross-referenced the public investor filings. Bradley had somehow secured nearly $2 million in seed funding over 14 months from private angel investors in Chicago. I accessed state property records and vehicle registration databases. The money trail was glaringly obvious. The startup had no payroll records for software engineers. Instead, the primary corporate expenditures were classified under vague categories like executive logistics, and brand development. I pulled the specific asset registrations linked to Bradley's corporate tax identification number. The dots connected instantly. The brand new Tesla Model X that Kiara drove to my parents' house was registered as a company vehicle. The luxury vacation rentals in Tulum and Dubai were expensed as corporate retreats. He was not building a technology platform. He was running a personal piggy bank funded by gullible investors, and my father was willing to destroy my life to protect it. "Are you listening to me, Zuri?" My father bellowed, his voice hoarse. "I am giving you until noon. You transfer that money, or I will ruin your life." I stopped scrolling through the fraudulent tax returns and looked at the blinking red light. I had captured exactly what I needed. "I hear you perfectly, Dad," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "You are threatening to defame my character in a public forum to extort a six-figure sum to cover up a felony. I highly recommend you consult a defense attorney before speaking to anyone at the church, and tell Bradley he should hire a better accountant. Expensing Kiara's designer handbags as marketing materials is an amateur mistake that the Internal Revenue Service will flag instantly." I pressed the red button to end the call and immediately saved the encrypted audio file. The morning was progressing exactly as anticipated. My family thought they could bully me into submission. They had no idea they were bringing a knife to a nuclear war. I took another sip of my coffee, waiting for Kiara to make her move. Less than 2 hours later, the heavy glass doors of my firm burst open. My corner office provided a perfect vantage point over the reception area, watching the chaos unfold. Kiara marched past the front desk, completely ignoring our receptionist's polite request to stop. She was a hurricane of designer fabrics and misplaced entitlement, her heels striking the polished marble floor with aggressive rhythmic thuds. Heads popped up from cubicles as she stormed through the bullpen, her voice already echoing across the silent professional space. I did not flinch. I simply pressed the intercom button on my phone and calmly asked building security to make their way to the 14th floor. By the time my office door swung violently inward, I was leaning back in my leather chair, hands steepled, watching my sister unravel in real time. "You vindictive, miserable sociopath!" Kiara screamed, slamming her expensive purse onto my mahogany desk. The impact knocked over a small stack of files, but I did not blink. "You are going to fix this right now. Bradley has been throwing up all morning. The leasing agent is already threatening to report the bounced checks to the police. You have the money, Zuri. I know you do. You are going to transfer it, and then you are going to call the bank and tell them you made a mistake." She leaned over the desk, her face flushed with a mixture of rage and panic. Her carefully styled hair was slightly disheveled. She looked around the office, raising her voice even louder, clearly hoping to shame me in front of my colleagues who were now openly staring through the glass walls. "My sister is a thief," she yelled toward the bullpen. "She stole from her own family." I remained entirely unresponsive to her theatrical display. Two large security guards dressed in crisp dark suits appeared in the doorway behind her. They looked at me for direction, their stances tense and ready. I raised a single finger signaling them to hold their position, but remain visible. I wanted Kiara to feel the presence of consequences. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The quietness of my tone forced her to stop screaming just to hear me. She glared at me, her chest-heaving mascara slightly smudged beneath her lower lashes. "I am not leaving this building without a wire transfer confirmation." Kiara spat, though her bravado faltered slightly when she noticed the two guards standing shoulder to shoulder blocking her exit. "You owe us that money. Mom and Dad gave it to me." "Mom and Dad gave you access to a ghost account," I corrected smoothly, picking up a sleek metal pen and twirling it between my fingers. "They committed a federal crime to appease a man who speaks in Silicon Valley word salads, and instead of packing your bags and preparing for your husband's inevitable arrest, you came to a corporate accounting firm to throw a toddler's temper tantrum. It is honestly fascinating to watch." Kiara slammed her hands flat on my desk, leaning in close. "Bradley is a genius. He is building an empire. You are just trying to sabotage him because no man will ever look at you the way he looks at me. He is a legitimate chief executive officer. His company is worth millions." "Is it?" I asked, allowing a razor-sharp smile to finally break across my face. I stopped twirling the pen and sat forward. That is a very interesting valuation, Kiara. Because according to the preliminary audit I started reviewing at 6 o'clock this morning, his company is currently holding roughly $12,000 in liquid assets while carrying over $3 million in undocumented liabilities. Kiara froze. The anger in her eyes was suddenly eclipsed by profound confusion. What are you talking about? How would you even know his company's internal financials? You are just a tax cruncher. I unlocked my primary monitor and dragged a specific highly confidential PDF document to the center of the screen. I swiveled the large display around so it faced her directly. I know his internal financials because my firm does not just crunch taxes. We are a premier forensic accounting agency specializing in corporate fraud, embezzlement, and white-collar crime. 2 weeks ago, the primary angel investors backing Bradley's alleged tech startup grew highly suspicious of his burn rate. They realized he had not delivered a single line of viable code in 14 months. So those investors did what smart money always does when they smell a rat. They hired an independent auditor to track every single penny they gave him. I tapped the screen, planting my manicured finger right on the title page of the official engagement letter. They hired my firm, Kiara, and as the senior partner in the fraud division, I was specifically assigned to lead this investigation. I have had full, unrestricted, legally mandated access to Bradley's entire corporate structure for 14 days. The silence in the office was absolute. The security guards watched quietly. Kiara stared at the glowing monitor, her eyes tracking the official corporate letterhead, the signatures of the wealthy Chicago investors, and the bold, undeniable print naming me as the lead independent investigator. The blood drained from her delicate face so rapidly I thought she might actually faint right there on my expensive imported office rug. She finally understood the true, terrifying magnitude of her husband's fatal mistake. "You are destroying us," she whispered, her voice hollow and defeated. I shook my head, closing the document with a sharp click of my mouse. "No, Kiara, I am just doing the math, and the absolute numbers prove that your perfect white husband is going to federal prison. The investors want their capital back, and my final report will ensure they recover every single cent by liquidating whatever fake assets he has left. He played a dangerous game, and now the federal authorities are going to collect the ultimate debt." I pulled open the bottom drawer of my desk and extracted a thick black leather binder. It landed on the glass surface with a heavy thud echoing in the tense silence of the office. Kiara flinched, but could not tear her eyes away from the embossed gold lettering on the cover. It was the preliminary forensic audit report, a comprehensive compilation of every financial sin her husband had committed over the past 14 months. I opened the binder and flipped to the executive summary, spinning the document so she could read the highlighted sections. "There is no Series A funding round, Kiara. Your husband is not negotiating with venture capitalists or institutional investors. He is running a textbook Ponzi scheme. He has been taking fresh capital from a new batch of gullible angel investors and using it to pay fake dividends to the original Chicago group, skimming a massive percentage off the top to fund your luxurious lifestyle." Kiara violently shook her head, her perfectly curled hair whipping around her face. She took a step back as if the binder itself were radioactive. "You are making this up. Bradley is a visionary. He works 80-hour weeks building his application. I have seen his pitch decks. I have met his developers. You just hate him because he represents everything you cannot have." I sighed, turning to the next tab in the binder marked with a red sticky note. I slid a glossy, high-resolution photograph across the desk. It was a screenshot from Kiara's own social media account showing her posing in front of the Burj Al Arab in Dubai, holding a limited edition Himalayan Birkin bag. Next to the photograph, I placed a printed bank statement from Bradley's primary corporate account. "Look at the highlighted transaction dates, Kiara. The day before you posted that photo, $35,000 was wired from the corporate operational fund to a luxury travel concierge in the Emirates. 2 days prior to that, $50,000 was transferred to an international fashion broker. Your husband did not buy that handbag with his hard-earned executive salary. He bought it with money intended for software development. The denial on Kiara's face morphed into a frantic, aggressive rage. She slapped the bank statement away, sending the paper fluttering to the floor. That is standard executive compensation. He is the founder of the company. He is entitled to draw a salary and take corporate retreats. You do not understand how the tech industry works. Startups have massive marketing budgets to project success and attract more capital. You are just a bean counter projecting your boring, miserable existence onto his success. I am not going to stand here and let you slander my husband with these doctored spreadsheets. I picked up the fallen paper and placed it neatly back into the binder. It is not a corporate retreat when you bring your wife stay in a honeymoon suite and fail to conduct a single business meeting during the entire trip. And it is certainly not executive compensation when the funds are explicitly earmarked in the investor contracts for engineering, payroll, and server architecture. I flipped to another section, pulling out a spreadsheet detailing the vehicle purchases. Your brand new Tesla Model X is registered to the company as a delivery vehicle. The insurance premiums are being paid by the exact same fund that was supposed to secure his downtown office space. That is why he was so desperate to steal my $160,000. The original investors requested an internal audit last week, and he needed to quickly replenish the empty operational accounts to hide the massive deficit. Kiara slammed her fists on the desk, her voice cracking as she screamed, "You are a liar! You manufactured this entire audit because you have always been jealous of me. You have hated me since we were kids because Mom and Dad always loved me more. You could not stand watching me marry a successful, handsome man while you sit alone in this sterile office every night. So you used your position to launch a fake investigation just to ruin my life." She was grasping at straws, projecting her deepest insecurities onto cold, hard data. I leaned forward, my expression devoid of any sympathy. The investors came to my firm, Kiara. I did not seek them out. They noticed the discrepancies when Bradley failed to produce a single line of functional code after burning through $2 million. He is not a tech genius. He is a con artist who memorized a few Silicon Valley buzzwords and found a family desperate enough for social validation to believe his nonsense. Our parents bought his act hook, line, and sinker because they wanted to show off a wealthy white son-in-law at their country club dinners. The security guards behind Kiara shifted their weight, ready to intervene if her aggression turned physical. She was trembling violently, her chest heaving as she stared at the irrefutable evidence of her impending ruin. Her perfect, curated life was collapsing around her, built entirely on stolen money and fragile lies. "There are no venture capitalists lining up to give him more money," I continued relentlessly. "He has exhausted the local angel investors. He has drained his corporate accounts. He tried to drain my savings. The walls are closing in, and the federal authorities are currently drafting the indictments. You can stand here and scream at me all day, calling me bitter and jealous, but it will not change the math. The money is gone. The illusion is over. And when those federal agents knock on your door, they are not going to care about your Instagram aesthetic or your status as the golden child. They will seize the cars, take the handbags, and put your husband in a federal penitentiary. The life you thought you had built on my back is completely finished. It is time that you finally grow up." Kiara snatched her designer bag off the glass desk, her knuckles stark white against the dyed leather. She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated venom, spinning on her expensive heels and storming past the security guards. She practically sprinted through the bullpen, shoving the heavy glass doors open so violently they reverberated on their hinges. I simply waved a hand to dismiss the security personnel, sat back in my leather chair, and took another sip of my now lukewarm coffee. I knew exactly what would happen next. It was a pattern established decades ago. Kiara would run straight to our parents, weaponize her tears, and spin a narrative where she was the innocent victim of my unwarranted cruelty. I gave it exactly 3 hours. At 1:15 in the afternoon, my office phone lit up with the caller identification displaying my mother's cell phone number. I pressed the record button on my secondary device, ensuring the audio capture was active and activated the speakerphone. I did not even have the chance to offer a greeting before the chaotic sounds of my family filled the room. Kiara was wailing loudly in the background, a theatrical, breathless sobbing that she had perfected since childhood. Over her dramatic performance, my mother's voice cut through the speaker like shattered glass. "You are a monster, Zuri. A cold, calculated, jealous monster. I cannot believe I raised a daughter who would stoop this low just to destroy her sister's happiness." "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied smoothly, organizing the audit files on my primary monitor. "I assume Kiara gave you her heavily edited version of our morning meeting." My father snatched the phone away, his deep voice booming with unchecked rage. "She told us everything. She told us you fabricated a ridiculous fake audit just to terrorize her. You printed out fake bank statements to convince her that Bradley is a criminal. You are mentally unwell, Zuri. This obsession you have with competing against your sister has finally pushed you over the edge. Bradley is a respected chief executive officer, and you are trying to ruin him out of pure spite." I kept my hands steady on the keyboard, refusing to let his aggressive volume rattle me. "I did not fabricate a single document, Dad. The Chicago Investment Group hired my firm 2 weeks ago. The financial records are pulled directly from federal banking databases. Your perfect son-in-law has zero revenue, zero product development, and over $3 million in unauthorized liabilities. He has been funneling investor capital directly into his personal checking accounts to buy Kiara's luxury vehicles and fund their international vacations. It is a textbook Ponzi scheme, and the federal authorities are already preparing the indictments." "Shut your mouth!" my mother screamed, snatching the phone back. "Bradley comes from a respectable family. He has a brilliant mind for the technology sector. He just secured a massive downtown office space yesterday. Why would he sign a commercial lease if his company was failing? You are just a bitter, lonely woman sitting in a sterile office all day. You cannot stand the fact that Kiara found a wealthy, successful, handsome white man to take care of her while you have absolutely nobody. You want to drag her down to your miserable level, and you are using your stupid accounting job to create these vicious lies." The sheer depth of their delusion was breathtaking. They were so desperate to maintain their proximity to Bradley's perceived white privilege and false wealth that they were willing to ignore concrete mathematical evidence. The commercial lease was secured with a fraudulent check. I stated, my voice echoing the clinical precision of a courtroom prosecutor. He wrote an $85,000 check against the joint account you illegally added Kiara to, the account that I already emptied. That check is going to bounce tomorrow morning. When it does, the commercial landlord will notify the authorities. Bradley's house of cards is collapsing right now, and if you continue to support him, you will be pulled down into the rubble with him. "The only person collapsing is you," Marcus roared the phone, picking up the sound of him slamming his fist against a table. "Bradley warned us you might do something like this. He told us forensic accountants are notorious for misinterpreting aggressive growth strategies as financial mismanagement. He is operating at a high level of venture capital, scaling something your small bureaucratic brain cannot possibly comprehend. He warned us you would be intimidated by his financial leverage." I paused, letting the profound absurdity of his statement hang in the digital space between us. Bradley had actually convinced my father that embezzlement was just a high-level growth strategy. There was no saving them. They had locked themselves inside a burning building and were aggressively defending the arsonist who lit the match. "I am going to say this once," I said, my tone shifting to an absolute chilling calm. "Do not give him any money. Do not cosign any loans. Do not leverage your assets to help him cover those bounced checks. When the Securities and Exchange Commission files their official charges, any capital you have mixed with his will be seized as part of the Federal Asset Recovery Program. If you give him a single dime, you will lose it all." My mother laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that dripped with condescension. "We do not need financial advice from a jealous spinster. Bradley is family, and we support our family. We are going to ensure he has every resource he needs to finalize his funding round and prove you wrong. You are dead to us, Zuri. Do not ever call this house again." The line went dead with a sharp click. I stared at the blinking call log on my screen. I had given them the warning. I had presented the facts. They chose the illusion over reality, desperately clinging to a fraudulent facade rather than accepting the truth from the daughter they had always despised. I reached over, saved the recorded audio file to my encrypted local drive, and turned my full attention back to the final audit report. Their financial execution was now entirely in their own hands. 72 hours passed in absolute clinical focus. I finalized the forensic audit report, formatting every spreadsheet, cross-referencing every bank transfer, and indexing every fraudulent expense Bradley made over the past year. The document was a masterpiece of financial prosecution, an irrefutable roadmap, tracing the stolen investor capital straight to Kiara's designer closet and Bradley's vanity projects. My desk phone rang. The caller identification displayed my father's name. I hesitated for a fraction of a second before hitting the record button on my secondary device and putting the call on speakerphone. Instead, my father's voice boomed through the speaker with an overwhelming delusional sense of triumph. "I told you we would handle it, Zuri," Marcus declared, his tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "Your little attempt to sabotage your sister's future has officially failed. The crisis is completely averted, and Bradley's company is moving forward without your stagnant money." I leaned forward, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The mathematics of the situation simply did not align. Bradley was tapped out. His personal accounts were overdrawn, and his corporate accounts were bleeding cash. "How exactly did you handle a $155,000 deficit, Dad?" I asked, maintaining my flat interrogative tone. Did Bradley suddenly learn how to write functional software and sell it overnight? My mother's voice chimed in. "Do not be sarcastic, Zuri. Your father protected his family." Marcus chuckled. "That is right. Since you locked up the funds, I took matters into my own hands. Our house has been fully paid off for 5 years. The equity is massive. I took out a $200,000 cash-out refinance and wired the funds directly to Bradley's corporate account this morning. The commercial lease is secured, the developers are paid, and the funding round is back on track. We beat you." The air in my office froze. I sat completely paralyzed, staring blankly at the dual monitors illuminating my face. My parents, who worked their entire lives to secure a beautiful debt-free home in a prestigious Atlanta neighborhood, had just mortgaged their ultimate safety net. They handed $200,000 of hard, tangible equity directly to a man currently under active investigation for federal wire fraud and embezzlement. "You leveraged the family home," I whispered, stunned. "It is an investment," my father snapped. "Bradley gave us a guaranteed promissory note. We are getting our full initial capital back with a 20% return next month. Plus, he gave us a corporate equity stake. We are securing generational wealth, something you know nothing about because you just hoard pennies." A cold, profound realization washed over me, extinguishing the lingering spark of familial obligation I had left. I had tried to warn them. I explicitly outlined the danger. I told them the exact nature of his crimes. But their obsession with Kiara, their desperation to maintain proximity to Bradley's hollow white privilege, and their deep-seated need to prove me wrong blinded them to basic survival instincts. They willingly shackled themselves to a sinking ship just to spite the only person trying to hand them a life vest. "Dad," I said, my voice dropping an octave devoid of anger or sorrow, "listen to me very carefully. Bradley's corporate accounts are flagged. The moment that $200,000 wire transfer hit his bank this morning, it was absorbed into a compromised ledger. When federal authorities freeze his assets, which will happen within the next 48 hours, based on the audit I am submitting today, your money will be seized as part of the criminal investigation. You are now an unsecured creditor in a massive federal fraud case." "Stop lying," my mother screeched. "You are furious because we found a way around your wicked little trap. Bradley is a good man and he is going to make us millions. You are cut out of this family, Zuri. We are writing you out of the will." I closed my eyes, taking a slow, deep breath. The emotional tether that tied me to their toxic approval for 33 years finally snapped. It was not a painful break. It felt like absolute crystalline freedom. There is no will left to write me out of, Mom, I replied with brutal honesty. You do not own your house anymore. You sold it to the bank to fund a criminal's vanity project. When federal agents arrest Bradley, he is going to face decades in prison. He will not pay back your promissory note. The bank will demand their mortgage payments, and without your retirement savings, which you just handed to a con artist, they will foreclose on the property. You are going to lose the house. You are going to lose everything. You jealous, psychotic bitch! Kiara's voice suddenly pierced the line. She had been listening the entire time. You are just trying to scare us. We are going to be rich, and you are going to die alone. I reached for my mouse, hovering the cursor over the submit button for the federal audit portal. I am not trying to scare you, Kiara. I am predicting your future using simple mathematics. You made your choice. You all made your choice. Do not call me when federal agents kick down your door. Do not call me when the bank posts the foreclosure notice on your manicured lawn. And absolutely do not call me asking for a single dime to save you from the streets. I am formally done with this family. Goodbye. I pressed the end call button, severing connections. Without a second thought, I blocked all their phone numbers, blocked their email addresses, and restricted their access to my office building. I then clicked Submit, sending the complete unredacted forensic audit directly to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Chicago Investor Group. The fatal mistake had been made, the trap had been sprung by their own hands, and the countdown to their absolute financial destruction had officially begun. The digital onslaught started exactly 48 hours after I submitted the forensic audit to the federal portal. I was sitting at my kitchen island sipping a dark roast espresso when my personal cell phone began vibrating hard enough to rattle against the granite countertop. Notifications flooded my locked screen in a rapid, unceasing waterfall. Messages from aunts, uncles, cousins, and at least a dozen prominent members of our family church were pouring in by the second. I unlocked the device and opened a direct message from my Aunt Clarice. It contained a single link to a public social media video and a text telling me I should fall to my knees and beg God for forgiveness. I tapped the link, casting the video to my living room television to view the spectacle in high definition. The production quality was surprisingly high for a spontaneous emotional breakdown. My mother and sister sat side by side on the plush cream-colored sofa in my parents' living room. Brenda was weeping openly, dabbing her carefully powdered cheeks with a monogrammed tissue. Kiara looked utterly devastated, wearing a modest, muted dress that completely contradicted her usual flashy designer aesthetic. She stared directly into the camera lens with wide, tear-filled eyes, portraying the perfect image of a heartbroken, innocent victim whose life was being torn apart by a malicious outsider. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this," Kiara began, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "But my own flesh and blood is actively trying to destroy my husband's life out of pure calculated malice." Brenda chimed in, placing a comforting hand on Kiara's shoulder. "We raised Zuri to understand the deep value of family. We gave her everything a child could want, but her heart has become so hardened by greed and resentment. She cannot stand to see her sister happily married to a successful visionary man. Because Zuri is a bitter, greedy spinster who refuses to soften her heart and find a partner, she wants to tear down the beautiful family Kiara is building." The video continued for 6 excruciating minutes. They wove a masterful, entirely fictitious narrative about a lonely, jealous woman who was using her corporate accounting job to fabricate lies and sabotage a brilliant tech startup. They claimed I was illegally hoarding family wealth and attempting to ruin Bradley's spotless reputation because he rejected my supposed inappropriate advances. The comments section below the video was a cesspool of outrage. Hundreds of people from our community were validating their delusion, calling me a sociopath, a traitor, and a total disgrace to the family name. People I had known since childhood were demanding I repent and return the money I supposedly stole from my hardworking brother-in-law. Any normal person might have crumbled under the weight of such a coordinated public character assassination. A weaker woman might have typed out a frantic defense or released a counterstatement to clear her name. I did neither of those things. I sat in the quiet comfort of my high-rise apartment watching the view count climb into the tens of thousands and felt absolutely nothing but a cold clinical satisfaction. They were sealing their own fate with every single view, every lie they posted, every defamatory accusation they broadcasted to the public was just another piece of digital evidence I captured and saved to my encrypted servers. They were handing federal prosecutors the exact proof of their absolute complicity in Bradley's fraudulent empire. By the time I arrived at my downtown office later that morning, the smear campaign had escalated beyond social media. My receptionist, a sharp young woman named Elena, buzzed my intercom the second I sat down at my desk. "Zuri, a courier just dropped off a priority overnight package for you. It requires a direct signature." I walked out to the reception area, signed the digital pad, and carried the thick heavyweight envelope back to my office. The return address belonged to a boutique corporate defense law firm based in Chicago, a firm known for aggressive intimidation tactics and highly publicized corporate litigation. I sliced the envelope open with a silver letter opener and extracted a 10-page legal document printed on premium stock paper. It was a formal cease and desist order drafted with aggressive, threatening legal jargon designed to terrorize a layman. The document accused me of tortious interference with prospective economic advantage, corporate espionage, and willful defamation of character against Bradley and his esteemed technology enterprise. The lawyers demanded I immediately retract my audit, issue a formal public apology to Bradley, and pay $3 million in punitive damages for allegedly scaring away his vital venture capital investors. The letter stated that if I did not comply within 24 hours, they would file a massive civil lawsuit against me and my accounting firm, seeking to revoke my professional licenses and seize all my personal assets. It was a terrifying, heavy-handed threat that would have sent my parents into a spiral of absolute obedience and fear. To me, it was nothing more than a glaring signal of Bradley's total desperation. I read through the hollow threats, noting the distinct lack of any factual refutation regarding the missing money. Bradley had clearly hired this expensive defense firm, using a portion of the $200,000 he had just swindled from my father's home equity loan. I was burning through stolen cash to pay lawyers to write a meaningless piece of paper. He thought a fancy letterhead and the threat of civil litigation would force me to retract a federal audit. He fundamentally misunderstood the gravity of his situation and the rigid reality of federal financial law. You cannot sue a forensic accountant for tortious interference when they are acting as an independent investigator appointed by your own defrauded investors. The cease and desist letter was completely legally baseless, a paper tiger built entirely on lies and bluffing. It proved that Bradley was terrified, trapped, and completely out of options. The walls of his Ponzi scheme were caving in around him, and this letter was his final, pathetic attempt to intimidate the only person holding the sledgehammer. I did not call my legal department to panic. I did not draft a response to defend my actions. I calmly walked over to the heavy-duty shredder sitting in the corner of my office, fed the 10-page document into the grinding metal teeth, and watched the expensive, threatening paper turn into useless confetti. The smear campaign and the legal threats were nothing more than the final death rattles of a collapsing fraud. I turned back to my computer, checking my encrypted email portal. A message from the lead investigator at the Securities and Exchange Commission was waiting in my inbox. The federal wheels were already in motion, and no amount of crying on the internet or baseless legal posturing could stop the absolute devastation that was about to hit my family. The noise outside my office windows was deafening, both literally and figuratively. My phone continued to buzz with notifications from furious relatives, while local news stations had started picking up the viral video my mother and sister posted. They were framing it as a tragic story of a jealous sibling trying to ruin a bucket. The court of public opinion was irrelevant to me. I did not deal in public relations or emotional manipulation. I dealt in cold, hard, irrefutable mathematics, and the numbers were screaming a completely different story. I pulled up the massive digital ledger I had been building for the past 2 weeks. The data visualization software on my primary monitor displayed a complex web of financial transactions connecting Bradley's supposedly legitimate corporate accounts to a vast network of personal expenditures. It was time to finalize the presentation for the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Chicago Investor Group. There could be absolutely no room for error, no ambiguity, and no legal loopholes. Every single cent had to be accounted for, traced, and verified. I started with the initial seed funding. The Chicago investors had wired $2 million into Bradley's corporate account 14 months ago. According to the original pitch deck, those funds were exclusively earmarked for software engineering, server infrastructure, and necessary operational overhead. I opened the cross-referenced bank statements. Within 48 hours of that initial deposit, Bradley had authorized a wire transfer of $400,000 to a shell company registered in Delaware. He named the entity Apex Innovations Management. It sounded professional, but my deep dive into the corporate registry revealed that he was the sole proprietor, and the business address was a virtual mail drop. From that Delaware account, the money fractured into dozens of personal streams. I meticulously highlighted the transactions. $60,000 wired directly to a luxury car dealership in Atlanta for the down payment on Kiara's Tesla. $120,000 transferred to a high-risk cryptocurrency exchange, which he promptly lost in a series of incredibly stupid leveraged trades. The embezzlement was not just arrogant, it was remarkably lazy. A skilled fraudster knows how to wash money through legitimate-looking vendor invoices or bloated consulting fees. Bradley simply treated the corporate account like a personal debit card, assuming his investors would never look past his charismatic presentations and flashy tech jargon. I created a dedicated slide for his so-called executive logistics budget. I attached the corresponding receipts. Flight records showed first-class tickets to Dubai, Paris, and Tulum. Hotel invoices confirmed bookings at luxury resorts that cost upwards of $5,000 a night. I even found a $40,000 charge at a premier diamond jeweler in downtown Atlanta, dated exactly 1 week before Kiara started flaunting her massive new engagement ring. The visual impact of seeing the investor capital juxtaposed directly next to photographs of my sister's designer accessories was staggering. It painted an undeniable picture of pure unfiltered theft. The most damning piece of evidence was the most recent. I opened the file containing my father's home equity loan transfer. Marcus had wired $200,000 into Bradley's primary business account just yesterday morning. My tracking software showed exactly what happened next. Bradley was terrified. He knew the investors were demanding an audit, and he needed to show a healthy balance sheet. But he also had outstanding debts. Within minutes of my father's transfer clearing, Bradley routed $85,000 to the commercial leasing office to cover his bounced check. He then wired $40,000 to a private defense attorney in Chicago, the same firm that had sent me the ridiculous cease and desist letter. The remaining $75,000 was immediately transferred into a private offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He was packing a parachute. He knew the collapse was imminent, and he was trying to stash away my parents' money to fund his eventual escape. I organized the data into a clear, linear, and highly detailed timeline. I used color-coded graphs to show the rapid depletion of investor capital alongside the simultaneous inflation of Bradley's personal asset portfolio. I included the forged signatures, the fake vendor invoices, and the desperate, frantic transfers made over the past 72 hours. I compiled everything into a secure, encrypted digital portfolio. The presentation was a lethal weapon forged entirely out of unassailable facts. I reviewed every slide, double-checking the account numbers and transaction dates. My forensic accounting team had verified the data 3 times over. The case was airtight. No defense attorney, no matter how expensive or aggressive, could argue against the raw mathematics I had laid out. As the afternoon sun began to dip behind the Atlanta skyline, casting long golden shadows across my desk, I felt a profound sense of closure. The frantic weeping videos my family posted online meant absolutely nothing. Their desperate attempts to shame me into submission were just the dying gasps of an illusion they could no longer afford to maintain. They thought they could bully me into financing a criminal simply because I was the quiet, reliable daughter they had always taken for granted. They underestimated the very skills they had spent years mocking. I clicked the final save button on the presentation, exported the master file to a secure portable hard drive, and logged out of the network. Tomorrow morning, I would walk into the most important meeting of my career. I would sit across from federal agents and defrauded billionaires, and I would hand them the exact tools they needed to dismantle Bradley's life. The numbers did not lie, and tomorrow, they would speak loud enough to shatter my family's fraudulent world forever. This was no longer about personal revenge or family drama. It was about pure, undeniable justice being executed through flawless, undeniable mathematics. The heavy frosted glass boardroom doors slid open with a very soft, subtle hiss. I stepped into the sprawling conference room on the 42nd floor, my heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble. The space was intimidating by design, featuring a massive mahogany table surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Seated around the table were the primary angel investors, 5 exceptionally unamused business veterans who backed Bradley's imaginary empire. At the far end of the room sat 2 federal agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission, their expressions unreadable and their posture rigid. And standing at the head of the table clutching a stack of glossy presentation folders was Bradley. He truly looked absolutely terrible and completely exhausted. His usually perfect hair was unkempt, his designer suit appeared slightly wrinkled, and a noticeable sheen of perspiration coated his forehead. When he saw me enter, his eyes widened in sheer panic, darting frantically toward the door as if calculating the distance for a quick escape. He attempted to recover his composure, forcing a wide, unconvincing smile. "Gentlemen," Bradley announced, his voice cracking slightly before he cleared his throat to lower the pitch. "I apologize for this unnecessary disruption. My company is experiencing an unprecedented phase of hypergrowth. We are scaling our user acquisition models, and unfortunately, that rapid expansion has caused some temporary administrative friction. The woman who just walked in is my sister-in-law, Zuri. We are currently navigating a highly sensitive, deeply personal family dispute. She has taken a minor internal accounting discrepancy and blown it wildly out of proportion due to a personal vendetta against my wife. I assure you the capital is securely deployed in our proprietary server architecture. I have printed the updated quarterly financial summaries for your review, showing our projected exponential returns once the Series A funding is finalized." He hastily began sliding his glossy folders across the mahogany table, desperate to control the narrative. The lead investor, a stern man named Richard Sterling, ignored the folder sliding toward him. He looked directly at me. "Miss Zuri, my partners and I paid your firm a substantial retainer for the truth. Please tell me we are not sitting here to litigate your family drama." I walked calmly to the front of the large room, completely ignoring Bradley's frantic, sweating presence. I plugged my encrypted external hard drive into the main presentation console. "Mr. Sterling, I have absolutely zero interest in discussing my family," I stated, my voice projecting crisp and clear across the vast room. "I am here to present the final findings of our independent forensic audit." The folders Bradley just handed you contain completely fabricated numbers generated by consumer-grade accounting software. If you direct your attention to the main screen, I will show you the actual verified banking records obtained via federal subpoena. I pressed a single button, and the massive digital display behind Bradley illuminated, casting a harsh blue light over his pale, terrified face. "Let us begin with the initial $2 million seed capital your group wired 14 months ago," I said, pointing to the screen. According to the startup prospectus, Bradley provided $1.5 million was allocated for software engineering, payroll, and server infrastructure. The reality is quite different. I clicked to the next slide. A side-by-side comparison appeared. On the left was Bradley's fake expenditure report. On the right was the verified bank ledger. Within 48 hours of receiving your capital, Bradley transferred $400,000 to a Delaware shell company, where he serves as the sole proprietor. From there, he executed a series of personal wire transfers. $60,000 was sent directly to a luxury automotive dealership in Atlanta to purchase a Tesla Model X for his wife. $120,000 was funneled into a high-risk cryptocurrency exchange and completely lost. $35,000 was wired to a luxury travel concierge for a vacation in Dubai. "That is a lie!" Bradley shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Spittle flew from his lips as he pointed an accusing finger at me. She hacked my accounts. She altered the digital footprint to frame me. Those were legitimate corporate networking trips. The vehicle was a company asset required for executive logistics. His desperate voice echoed shrilly across the room. The investors did not even blink. Richard Sterling leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers, his gaze fixed intensely on the screen. "Please continue, Miss Zuri," Sterling commanded quietly. "I want to see exactly where the rest of our money went." I clicked to the third slide, presenting a sprawling web of transactional data. The remaining capital was systematically drained through hundreds of fraudulent expenses. He used investor funds to pay for expensive dinners, designer clothing, and high-end jewelry. However, the most critical data point occurred just yesterday. I pulled up the final, most damning slide. Facing your demands for an independent audit, Bradley recognized his operational accounts were dangerously overdrawn. I was actively bouncing commercial checks. To cover his tracks, he manipulated my father into taking out a $200,000 home equity loan. My father wired that money into Bradley's corporate account yesterday morning. Bradley stumbled backward, his shoulder bumping hard into the presentation screen. "But here is the final piece of the puzzle," I continued relentlessly. "Bradley did not use my father's money to pay you back. He used $85,000 to cover a fraudulent check written for his commercial lease. Then, at exactly 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, he attempted to wire $75,000 to a private offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I was actively attempting to flee the country with stolen assets." I turned to the federal agents sitting silently at the back. "Gentlemen, the forensic audit is complete. You have the raw data, the bank verifications, and the proof of flight risk. The floor is entirely yours now." The two federal agents stood simultaneously. The sharp screech of their chairs pushing back against the hardwood floor cut through the heavy silence of the boardroom. Agent Miller, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a completely impassive expression, unbuttoned his suit jacket. His partner, Agent Davis, pulled a thick stack of folded legal documents from his briefcase. Bradley backed away from the screen, his shoulder blades hitting the floor-to-ceiling glass window. There was nowhere left to run. He looked like a trapped animal, his chest heaving, his expensive tailored suit now drenched in a cold, terrified sweat. "Bradley Harrison," Agent Miller said, his voice carrying the deep, unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. "We are executing a federal arrest warrant issued this morning by the United States District Court. You are being charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, and interstate embezzlement." Bradley held his hands up, palms facing outward as if he could physically push the charges away. Wait, please. This is a massive misunderstanding. Richard, tell them I can liquidate some assets. I can make the firm whole. I just need 48 hours to restructure the capital stack." Richard Sterling did not move a single muscle. The lead investor looked at Bradley with a mixture of profound disgust and absolute contempt. "The only thing you are restructuring today is your wardrobe, Bradley. You stole from the wrong people. Do not speak to me ever again." Agent Davis stepped forward, grabbing Bradley's right arm with a swift, practiced motion. Bradley tried to yank his arm back, a pathetic display of resistance that lasted less than a second. The federal agent effortlessly twisted his arm behind his back, forcing Bradley to bend forward over the polished mahogany table. The sharp metallic click of steel handcuffs echoing through the quiet boardroom was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of absolute mathematical justice. "Bradley Harrison, you have the right to remain silent." Agent Davis recited, his voice a steady rhythmic drone that stripped away the last remaining shreds of Bradley's fake executive persona. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights?" Bradley did not answer. He collapsed to his knees, dragging the agent down slightly. The arrogant tech genius, the white savior, who had condescended to me at my parents' dining table just a few days ago, was gone. In his place was a weeping, blubbering con artist begging for mercy. Please, Bradley sobbed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. My wife is at home. We just signed a lease. I cannot go to prison. I will pay it all back. I swear to God I will pay it all back. Zuri, tell them it is family money. I stood perfectly still at the front of the room, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I looked down at him, feeling absolutely zero pity. My face remained a mask of pure stoic professionalism. I told you yesterday, Bradley. I do not finance fraudulent business ventures. The federal government does not care about your family connections, and neither do I. You made your choices when you decided to steal my life savings to fund your delusions. Now you get to pay the price. The agents hauled him roughly to his feet. His designer tie was completely askew. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat and tears. He looked utterly pathetic. The illusion of the brilliant, untouchable startup founder was completely shattered. He was just a thief in an expensive suit, and the suit was not even paid for. Agent Miller grabbed him by the bicep, marching him toward the frosted glass doors. Walk, the agent commanded simply. The boardroom doors hissed open, and the entire floor of my accounting firm got a front-row seat to the spectacle. Junior analysts, senior partners, and administrative staff lined the glass walls of the bullpen outside. They watched in stunned silence as the federal agents paraded the weeping fraudster through the main corridor. He kept his head down, sobbing uncontrollably, his cuffed hands secured tightly behind his back. Richard Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. He walked over to me, extending his hand. I shook it firmly. Miss Zuri, your work here was exceptional. You saved my firm from pouring another $5 million into this black hole. You have my profound gratitude, and your agency will be receiving a highly favorable review. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I replied smoothly. The numbers never lie. It was a pleasure doing business with you. The investors filed out of the room, leaving me alone with the glowing presentation screen and the scattered, pathetic remnants of Bradley's fake financial folders. I walked over to the heavy mahogany table, picked up one of his glossy brochures, filled with empty, meaningless buzzwords and stolen dreams, and dropped it directly into the metal trash can. The battle in the corporate boardroom was officially over. I had executed my professional duty flawlessly. But the devastating personal fallout was just beginning. The dominoes were falling rapidly, and the next one to topple would completely crush my parents. Their pristine, artificial world was about to collapse under the weight of their own terrible decisions. I unplugged my encrypted hard drive, slid it into my briefcase, and walked out of the quiet room. I had to prepare for the inevitable, frantic phone calls. The true cost of their blind favoritism was about to be deducted directly from their bank accounts, and I was going to make sure they felt every single cent of that devastating loss. They had wagered their entire future on a criminal simply because he fit their aesthetic, entirely ignoring the competent, successful daughter standing right in front of them. Their ultimate punishment was arriving in full force today. I returned to my corner office and closed the heavy glass door, shutting out the excited whispers of my colleagues in the bullpen. The adrenaline from the boardroom confrontation was slowly fading, replaced by a profound, razor-sharp clarity. I took my seat, unlocked my dual monitors, and opened the federal banking portal. My firm possessed limited clearance to track ongoing asset freezes during active federal investigations. I wanted to watch the exact moment the hammer dropped. I did not have to wait long. At precisely 2:14 in the afternoon, a cascading series of red alerts populated my left screen. The Department of Justice had officially executed the asset freeze. Every single bank account connected to Bradley Harrison, personal, corporate, domestic, and offshore, was instantly locked. The financial guillotine had fallen. But the true masterpiece of this operation was not Bradley's ruin. It was the collateral damage expanding outward like a shockwave. I pulled up the specific routing number associated with the $200,000 cash-out refinance my father had executed just 24 hours ago. Marcus had been so arrogant, so blindingly eager to play the wealthy benefactor for his white son-in-law, that he ignored the most basic rule of finance: never wire equity into an unverified commercial account. The moment my father authorized that transfer, he legally tethered his primary residence to a federal crime scene. The mechanics of his destruction were beautiful in their ruthless efficiency. When my father took out that massive loan against his paid-off property, the bank issued the funds based on a specific commercial promissory note Bradley had drafted. It was a fraudulent document backed by imaginary startup equity. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation flagged Bradley's corporate account for felony embezzlement, the automated compliance algorithms at my father's bank were triggered instantly. Financial institutions do not play games with federal indictments. The bank's risk management software recognized that the $200,000 of borrowed equity had been deposited directly into a seized criminal account. This triggered an automatic non-negotiable acceleration clause in my father's mortgage contract. The bank was legally demanding immediate repayment of the entire loan balance in full to mitigate their exposure to federal money laundering investigations. My father did not have $200,000 in liquid cash to cover the margin call. He had handed every last available cent to a man currently sitting in a federal holding cell. At 3:30, my office phone rang. It was not a direct line call. My receptionist, Elena, buzzed through. "Zuri, I have a Marcus on line 1. He sounds completely unhinged. He is demanding to speak with you, claiming it is a catastrophic family emergency. Should I transfer him to security?" I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "No, Elena, put him through. I will take this one." I pressed the speaker button, folding my hands in my lap. "Good afternoon, Dad," I said, my voice as calm as a placid lake. The response was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. "Zuri, Zuri, you have to help us," Marcus screamed, his usual booming, authoritative voice completely shattered. He sounded breathless, frantic, like a man drowning in a stormy ocean. "The bank just called, the vice president of lending just called my personal cell phone. They are accelerating the loan. They said the funds were seized by the FBI. "I am aware," I replied smoothly. "I submitted the audit this morning. Bradley was arrested in my boardroom 2 hours ago. He is currently facing multiple federal felonies." A sharp, ragged gasp echoed over the speaker. It was my mother. Brenda was listening on another extension. "Arrested!" she shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that practically rattled my office windows. "What do you mean arrested? He is a chief executive officer. You cannot let them do this. The bank told your father, we have to pay back the $200,000 by Friday, or they are initiating immediate foreclosure proceedings. We do not have that kind of cash. Zuri, you know we do not." "I do know that, Mom," I stated, tapping a manicured fingernail against my desk. "I warned you yesterday. I explicitly told you not to mix your assets with his. I explained the mathematics of a Ponzi scheme. But you called me a jealous, psychotic bitch. You told me you were securing generational wealth. You chose to leverage your paid-off $1 million home to impress your country club friends with a fake tech mogul. Now the bank is coming to collect their debt. You have to transfer your portfolio." Marcus bellowed, desperation completely stripping away his pride. "You have the $160,000, wire it to my account right now. I can pull from my retirement to cover the rest. You cannot let the bank take our house, Zuri. We built this family in that house. You grew up in that house." "I grew up in a house where I was treated like a second-class citizen," I corrected coldly, stripping away the last remaining shreds of his parental manipulation. "I grew up in a house where my accomplishments were ignored, where my career was mocked, and where my sister was worshipped, simply for existing. You did not build a family, Dad. You built a toxic, superficial facade, and you just mortgaged it to a criminal." "Please, Zuri, I am begging you," Brenda sobbed, the sound of her crying filtering through the speaker in a pathetic, wet display of absolute defeat. "My friends in the neighborhood will see the foreclosure signs. The ladies at the church will know we will be ruined. We will have nowhere to go. You are our daughter. You are supposed to honor your parents. You stopped being my parents the moment you forged my signature to steal my life savings," I replied, feeling absolutely no pity for the weeping woman on the other end of the line. "You gambled your entire life on Bradley because he represented the white wealth and status you craved. You wanted the illusion so badly that you ignored the reality standing right in front of you. The bank is executing a standard risk mitigation protocol. You signed the paperwork. You authorized the wire transfer. This is the consequence of your own staggering financial illiteracy." "I will sue you," Marcus screamed, a final desperate and entirely toothless threat. I will take you to court for destroying my family. You cannot afford a lawyer, Dad, I reminded him gently. Your accounts are frozen, your equity is gone, and your credit score is about to plummet into the low 400s. Enjoy the foreclosure process. I hear the bank moves exceptionally fast when federal fraud is involved. I reached forward and pressed the end call button. The line went dead. The silence in my office returned thick, peaceful, and wonderfully quiet. The first massive domino had officially fallen, crushing their arrogant, superficial world into dust. The house they loved more than their own daughter was gone, lost to their own insatiable, blinding greed. The peace in my office lasted exactly 3 hours. The afternoon sun was casting long amber streaks across my desk when my personal cell phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but my forensic intuition immediately recognized the area code. Marcus had undoubtedly shattered his phone in a fit of rage, leaving my mother to scramble for a backup device. I watched the screen flash silently. Part of me wanted to let it ring into the void. The professional, detached part of my brain knew that engaging further was unnecessary. The audit was submitted. The authorities had Bradley and the bank held the deed to their estate. But there was a final cord of maternal manipulation that needed to be severed. I tapped the green button. Zuri, please do not hang up on me, Brenda pleaded. Her voice was unrecognizable. The polished, arrogant tone of the country club socialite had entirely evaporated. What remained was the ragged, pathetic sound of a woman who had just realized she was standing on the edge of a bottomless cliff. I could hear the faint, hollow echo of the large, empty house behind her. Marcus left. He drove off in his car and will not answer my calls. I am sitting here on the living room floor alone. The bank just sent a courier with a formal notice of default. They are giving us 30 days to vacate the premises. 30 days is standard for an accelerated commercial default, I stated, keeping my voice perfectly level. You should start packing the china tonight. Cardboard boxes are cheap if you buy them in bulk from the hardware store. How can you be so cruel? She sobbed. I am your mother, Zuri. I gave birth to you. I fed you, clothed you, and put a roof over your head. You cannot just sit in your downtown office and let us become homeless. Kiara is a mess. Bradley's lawyers are asking for a massive retainer we cannot afford. We are drowning and you are holding a life raft. You have the $160,000 safely locked away. Please, Zuri. Unlock the trust. Wire the money to the bank. It will cover the deficit and stop the foreclosure. We will pay you back, I swear it. I let her desperate breaths fill the silence. The sheer manipulation of her words was staggering. She was trying to weaponize the biological fact of my birth to erase a literal attempt at grand larceny. I leaned forward. Do not dare invoke motherhood to cover up your greed, Mom. You did not make a mistake. You made a calculated gamble and you lost. I was confused, Brenda wailed, her voice echoing wildly. Your father and Bradley, they used all those big financial words. They told me it was a guaranteed investment. I am just a retired teacher, Zuri. They manipulated me into signing those banking forms. I thought we were just helping family. I never wanted to hurt you. That is a lie, I replied, my tone dropping to a sharp clinical precision. You knew exactly what you were doing. When you stood up at that anniversary dinner and clinked your crystal champagne flute, you were not confused. You were gloating. You looked me right in the eyes and smiled when you told me you handed my life savings over to a man you have known for less than 2 years. You did it because you could not stand the fact that the daughter you viewed as a boring failure had quietly accumulated more wealth than your precious golden child. No, Zuri, no, she cried out. I will change. We will change. If you pay off the bank, we will rewrite the deed. We will put the house in your name. We will cut Kiara off completely. We will not give her another dime. Just please save the house. I cannot let my friends see me carrying moving boxes. The humiliation will kill me. Her priorities were so profoundly warped that they bordered on comedic. Even while facing absolute financial ruin and the total collapse of her family, her primary concern was the optics. She was terrified of the gossip at the country club. The superficiality was baked into her bones. You are offering to cut off your favorite child to save your own reputation, I noted coldly. That tells me everything I need to know about your loyalty. You want me to buy a house? I do not want to save parents who never wanted me. I am a forensic accountant. I do not throw good money after bad. You chose to gamble your entire livelihood on a charismatic fraudster because he fit your aesthetic of white wealth. You bet the house on Bradley and the house lost. You are going to let your own mother end up on the street over a grudge, she screamed, abandoning the pathetic pleading for pure venom. God will punish you for this, Zuri. You will burn for turning your back on your blood. My blood tried to rob me blind, I stated firmly, ignoring her theatrical curses. You have 30 days to secure a moving truck. I suggest you start looking at one-bedroom apartments in the outer suburbs. It is time you and Dad learned how to live on a budget. Do not call this number again. I will not answer. Zuri, wait, please. I pressed the red icon on my screen, cutting off her shrill scream. I immediately navigated to my phone settings and blocked the unknown number. The final tether was officially severed. I sat in my quiet office watching the sunset paint the Atlanta skyline in brilliant shades of orange and violet. There was no guilt in my chest. There was no lingering sadness. There was only the profound, unshakable peace of a woman who had successfully protected her future. I grabbed my trench coat from the brass hook by the heavy glass door and walked out of the office. The storm behind me was raging fiercely, but my sky was absolutely clear. The 30th day arrived with brutal swiftness. The manicured lawn of my parents' estate, a yard that previously hosted lavish parties, was trampled under the shoes of real estate speculators. It was a crisp morning, but the atmosphere was thick with desperation. The bank wasted zero time executing the foreclosure. Federal fraud implications expedited the paperwork with ruthless efficiency, handing the deed directly to the auction block. I sat in my downtown office monitoring the proceedings through a secure live audio feed connected to my real estate attorney. Her name was Evelyn Pierce, a shark in a tailored suit, who specialized in distressed asset acquisitions. She was physically standing on the front walk, blending in perfectly with the crowd of investors looking to snatch up suburban real estate. Through Evelyn's open microphone, I heard the pathetic broken murmurs of my family. Marcus, Brenda, and Kiara were huddled together on the edge of the driveway. Their physical transformation over the past month was staggering. The arrogant swagger was completely gone. Marcus wore a wrinkled polo shirt, his shoulders slumped, his face unshaven and hollow. Brenda stood beside him, clutching a cheap canvas tote instead of her designer purse. Kiara looked the worst of all. With Bradley denied bail and awaiting trial in a federal detention center, her source of fraudulent funding evaporated overnight. She had been forced to move back into her childhood bedroom 2 weeks ago. She stood on the driveway, wrapping a thin cardigan tightly around her chest, staring blankly at the auctioneer setting up his portable podium. They genuinely believed that a sympathetic investor might purchase the property and allow them to sign a lease agreement. They were praying for a miracle. The auctioneer coughed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are opening the bidding for this premium residential property. We will start the bidding at $800,000. The crowd murmured. It was a steep starting price, but the property was located in a highly coveted school district. A man in a gray suit raised his paddle immediately. 800,000. 850, a woman counterbid. The price climbed steadily. I sat in my office tracking the numbers. The property was appraised at just over $1.2 million. The investors were hoping to cap out around the $1 million mark. I tapped my earpiece. Evelyn let them exhaust themselves. Wait until the bidding stalls at the $1 million threshold, then crush them. Copy that, Evelyn whispered back. 950,000, the man in the gray suit called out, his voice hesitant. The crowd went silent. The auctioneer began his rhythmic chant, looking for a higher number. 950 going once, 950 going twice. 1.2 million. Evelyn's voice rang out across the lawn, sharp, clear, and incredibly loud. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It was an aggressive, overwhelming jump in price. She instantly eliminated the field of bargain hunters by offering the full appraised market value in a single breath. The man in the gray suit lowered his paddle. The other investors muttered to themselves, stepping back. No one was going to fight a bidder throwing around that kind of capital on a Tuesday morning. 1.2 million, the auctioneer repeated, sounding stunned. Do I hear 1.25? No, 1.2 million, going once, going twice. Sold to the lady in the black suit. I leaned back in my leather chair, a slow, satisfying smile spreading across my face. The house was officially mine. Through the audio feed, I heard the heavy footsteps of my father approaching Evelyn. Marcus was desperate. He had just watched a stranger purchase his entire life's work in a matter of seconds. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus said, his voice trembling with a pathetic, groveling tone. "I am Marcus. This is my wife Brenda and my daughter Kiara. This was our home." Evelyn did not offer her hand. "Congratulations on the sale, Marcus. Please step back. I need to finalize the transfer documents." "Please, just a moment," Marcus begged, ignoring her professional boundary. "We have lived here for decades. We hit a sudden, unexpected financial hardship due to a terrible misunderstanding. We were hoping the new owner might be willing to negotiate a lease agreement. We can pay rent. We just need to stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. My daughter's husband is dealing with a legal issue and she needs a stable roof over her head." Listening from my office, the sheer audacity of his request made me shake my head. He was still prioritizing Kiara's comfort over basic reality. He was begging a stranger for a handout while attempting to paint Bradley's federal crimes as a simple legal issue. "I do not negotiate lease agreements on the lawn," Evelyn stated coldly. "I represent a private investment trust. My client purchases distressed assets entirely in cash. The funds are already clearing the escrow account as we speak." Brenda let out a small gasp. "A private trust? Oh, thank the Lord. Perhaps your client has a charitable heart. If you could give us their contact information, I am sure we could explain our situation. We are good God-fearing people. We just need a little grace." "My client is fully aware of your exact situation," Evelyn replied, the sound of her signing the final auction documents echoing softly through the microphone. "In fact, my client is the one who specifically instructed me to bid the full market value to ensure no other buyer could possibly acquire this deed." Kiara stepped forward, her voice laced with a sudden, desperate curiosity. "Who is your client? Why would they care so much about our house?" "My client will be arriving in person to answer that question," Evelyn said, packing her documents into her leather briefcase. "I highly suggest that you just wait right here on the front grass. She will handle this entire situation directly." I disconnected the audio feed and gently closed my laptop. I grabbed my house keys, draped my long trench coat over my arm, and took the elevator to the parking garage. My matte black Porsche Panamera sat silently in its reserved space, a stark contrast to the rusty sedans my parents had forced me to drive during college while Kiara paraded in convertibles. I slid into the driver's seat, the engine purring to life. The drive from downtown Atlanta to my parents' upscale neighborhood usually took 40 minutes. Today the roads seemed entirely clear. I navigated the familiar winding streets lined with towering oak trees. This was the neighborhood that had judged me, the community that had watched the smear campaign videos with gossiping eyes. Now I was returning not as the disgraced spinster they painted me to be, but as the sole proprietor of the ground they stood on. As I turned the final corner, the pathetic scene came into full view. The small crowd of disgruntled property speculators was slowly dispersing. Evelyn remained standing on the edge of the driveway, the picture of professional detachment. And there, huddled near the front portico, were Marcus, Brenda, and Kiara. The imposing figures of my childhood were reduced to shivering, desperate shadows of their former selves. I pressed the accelerator, the Porsche gliding smoothly down the street before making a sharp turn into the wide driveway. The sudden arrival of a luxury vehicle instantly drew their attention. Marcus squinted against the morning sun, trying to peer through my tinted windshield. Brenda clutched his arm, her posture rigid with terror and desperate hope. They were hoping for a merciful savior. They had absolutely no idea they were about to face their ultimate consequence. I shifted the car into park, but left the engine running. Through the glass, I watched the exact second the devastating realization hit them. I lowered the driver's side window just enough for my face to be clearly visible. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes widening to the size of saucers. His mouth dropped open. He stumbled over his own feet, letting go of my mother's arm. Brenda let out a piercing gasp that echoed across the lawn. Kiara simply froze, staring at the glossy black hood of my sports car as if it were an alien spacecraft. Then the absolute delusion of my parents took over. The same people who had publicly cursed my name, who had threatened to ruin my reputation, suddenly transformed into weeping, overjoyed victims who believed they had just been rescued. Marcus broke into a run. He practically sprinted across the driveway, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Brenda was right behind him, sobbing loudly, her hands raised toward the sky in a gesture of pure relief. "Zuri! Oh my God, Zuri!" My mother wailed, her voice cracking with manufactured joy. She rushed to the driver's side door, pressing her hands against the glass. "You came back. You bought the house. You saved us. I knew you would not abandon your family." Marcus slammed his hand onto the roof of the Porsche, weeping openly. "I am so sorry, sweetheart," he cried, his voice trembling with what sounded like genuine relief. "I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong about everything. You are the smart one. You are the successful one. We were blinded by Bradley, but you saw the truth. You used your money to protect the family estate. You are an absolute blessing, Zuri, a true angel." I turned off the ignition, letting the engine fade into silence. I did not immediately unlock the doors. I sat inside my climate-controlled cabin, watching them weep and grovel against the windows. Kiara slowly walked up behind them, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She looked defeated, but the relief on her face was undeniable. Even my spoiled sister believed that I had just spent $1.2 million to secure her a comfortable place to sleep while her husband awaited federal trial. They genuinely believed that my highest purpose, my ultimate triumph, was bailing them out of a disaster they had deliberately orchestrated against my warnings. I pressed the button to unlock the doors. The electronic click was loud in the quiet air. I pushed the door open, forcing my mother to step back. I stepped out of the vehicle, my stilettos planting firmly on the driveway. I smoothed the crisp lapels of my designer trench coat and stood to my full height. I simply stared at them, letting their hysterical tears of joy wash over me like background noise. Brenda lunged forward, throwing her arms around my shoulders, sobbing into my coat. "Thank you," she repeated. "I will cook your favorite dinner tonight. We will set up the guest room. Kiara is divorcing that horrible man and we will heal together. You bought our home back." Marcus reached out, attempting a group embrace. "We will transfer the deed back into a trust, Zuri. You can be the trustee. We will do things your way. You saved the legacy." I stood rigid, refusing to return the embrace. I let my arms hang casually at my sides. I waited until my mother realized I was not hugging her. She slowly pulled away, a deep flicker of absolute confusion crossing her eyes as she registered my stoic expression. Evelyn stepped forward, handing me a sleek folder containing the finalized auction paperwork. "I think there is a profound misunderstanding happening right now," I said, my voice cutting through the crisp air like a blade. The lack of emotion in my tone caused my father to freeze. His eager, relieved smile faltered instantly. Kiara uncrossed her arms, fresh terror bleeding into her eyes. They were finally noticing that I was not looking at them with love or forgiveness. I was looking at them the exact same way I look at a spreadsheet full of bad data right before I delete it entirely, erasing every single trace completely. I took a deliberate step backward, creating a physical boundary between my pristine coat and my mother's reaching hands. The sudden movement caused Brenda to stumble slightly, her arms grasping empty air. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing, as he looked from me to the severe, unsmiling face of my attorney, Evelyn. The morning breeze rustled the leaves of the giant oak tree in the front yard, the only sound breaking the heavy silence that had just fallen over the driveway. I opened the sleek leather folder Evelyn had handed me. The crisp white documents inside represented the absolute transfer of power. For 33 years, this exact property had been the ultimate symbol of my parents' authority. It was the fortress where they had curated their perfect fictional family image. It was the castle where they had crowned Kiara as royalty and banished me to the dungeons of their disregard. Now holding the finalized auction paperwork, I felt nothing but the cool, clinical satisfaction of an investor closing a highly profitable deal. "I think you have deeply misunderstood the nature of my presence here today," I stated, my voice echoing clearly against the brick facade of the house. "I did not drive across town to rescue a family that tried to ruin me. Marcus blinked rapidly, his mind struggling to process the stark reality of my tone. He reached out a trembling hand, still clinging to the desperate illusion that I was playing some kind of complex psychological game before saving them. Zuri, please. I know you are angry. You have every right to be furious with us. We made a terrible, terrible mistake with Bradley. But you bought the house. You paid the bank. We can put this all behind us now and start fresh. I pulled a single, formally drafted sheet of paper from the folder and held it out toward him. Marcus hesitated, then took the document, his eyes darting to the bold black letters printed across the top margin. I watched his eyes track across the page, witnessing the exact moment his fragile hope shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The color drained entirely from his face. His jaw slackened and the paper began to shake violently in his hands. "This is a 30-day notice to vacate," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking into a high, wheezing sound that barely resembled human speech. "You are serving us with an eviction notice. Zuri, this is our home." Brenda let out a sharp, breathless gasp. She snatched the paper from his hands, her eyes scanning the legal text frantically. "No, no, this cannot be right. You cannot evict your own parents from their home. You have the money. You paid the bank in cash. You saved the property." "I saved the property from falling into the hands of a competing investment firm," I corrected her smoothly, maintaining unwavering eye contact. "I did not save your home. You lost your home the moment you decided to leverage your equity to finance a criminal enterprise. I purchased a distressed asset at a public auction. It was a purely mathematical decision. The land beneath your feet is located in one of the most highly coveted, rapidly appreciating school districts in the entire metropolitan area. The acquisition made perfect fiscal sense for my private investment portfolio. That is the only reason I am standing on this driveway right now." Kiara pushed her way past our mother, her face twisting into an ugly mask of pure hatred. "You bought the house just to kick us out into the street. You spent over $1 million just to watch us suffer. You are a sick, twisted psychopath." I turned my gaze to my sister, offering her a smile so devoid of warmth it could freeze water. "I did not spend a single dime to watch you suffer, Kiara. Your suffering is entirely a byproduct of your own staggering financial illiteracy and your husband's federal crimes. I spent $1.2 million because the projected return on investment for this specific parcel of land is exceptionally high. You are simply collateral damage in a corporate acquisition." Marcus fell to his knees on the concrete driveway. He completely abandoned any remaining shred of his patriarchal dignity. "Where are we supposed to go, Zuri? We have absolutely nothing left. The bank froze the retirement accounts. Bradley's lawyers took the last of our cash. We cannot even qualify to rent a cheap apartment with the foreclosure on our credit records. You cannot throw us out. This house is our entire legacy. It is the only thing we have left to our name." I looked down at the man who had threatened to destroy my reputation just a few weeks prior. "Your legacy was built on superficial lies, Dad, and this house is no longer a part of it. In exactly 30 days, my development team is bringing in the heavy machinery. We are going to bulldoze this entire colonial mansion right down to the foundation. We are ripping out the manicured lawn, filling in the swimming pool, and tearing down the oak trees. The neighborhood you prized so much will soon watch the destruction of your false kingdom." Brenda collapsed against the hood of my car, wailing uncontrollably. I ignored her dramatic display and continued detailing the future. "The zoning board already approved the permits for high-density residential construction. I am building a highly lucrative multi-family rental complex on this exact spot. It will feature 12 luxury units, and the monthly rental income will yield a massive, continuous profit for my private trust. The home where you made me feel utterly worthless is going to be ground into dust to fund my permanent financial independence. Every brick that falls will erase the memory of your terrible parenting. You have exactly 30 days to pack whatever belongings the federal authorities have not already flagged for seizure. I suggest you start looking into cheap extended stay motels." The finality of my words hung in the crisp morning air, heavy and absolute. Kiara stared at the manicured lawn, the realization finally penetrating the thick layer of entitlement that had shielded her for 3 decades. The pristine grass she was standing on was scheduled for complete annihilation. Her breathing hitched, accelerating into a rapid, shallow panic. She staggered backward, her hands flying to her perfectly highlighted hair, gripping the strands so tightly her knuckles turned white. A low, guttural sound clawed its way out of her throat, escalating rapidly into a piercing, hysterical shriek that echoed off the neighboring brick facades. It was not a cry of sorrow. It was the terrifying, unhinged scream of a spoiled child whose entire fabricated universe had just been incinerated. She dropped to her knees right there on the concrete driveway, her expensive designer dress scraping against the rough surface. "You cannot do this to me," Kiara wailed, her voice cracking as she rocked back and forth. "My husband is sitting in a federal holding cell. The government froze my bank accounts. They seized my car yesterday. I do not have a single dollar to my name. I am going to be completely homeless. Zuri, I am going to have to sleep on the street." She pounded her fists against the pavement, completely abandoning any remaining shred of her carefully curated socialite persona. The facade of the wealthy tech founder's wife was entirely obliterated, leaving behind nothing but a terrified, helpless woman who had never faced a single genuine consequence in her entire life. "I am your little sister. We share the same blood. You are supposed to protect me. You have millions of dollars and you are just going to let me starve in a gutter because you are still holding on to some pathetic childhood grudge." I did not flinch. I did not step forward to offer a comforting hand. I stood perfectly still next to the gleaming black hood of my Porsche, looking down at her writhing form with the detached clinical observation of a scientist studying a microscopic specimen. I let my eyes slowly travel up and down her frame. I took in the tear-stained cheeks, the smeared expensive mascara, the ruined hem of her luxury boutique dress, and the utter lack of any practical survival skills. She had spent her entire existence coasting on pretty privilege, manipulating our parents and marrying a white-collar criminal to secure a status she never actually earned. She had mocked my career, belittled my work ethic, and happily participated in the attempted theft of my life savings. Now she expected biological proximity to act as a magical shield against total ruin. "I am not holding on to a childhood grudge, Kiara," I stated, my voice as cold and sharp as winter ice. "I am simply refusing to finance your profound incompetence. You are 30 years old. You are a fully grown adult with a clean bill of health and absolutely zero dependence. If you are terrified of starving in a gutter, I highly suggest you do exactly what every other functioning adult on this planet does when they need money to survive. Go get a job." The words seemed to physically strike her. Kiara stopped rocking and looked up at me, her tear-filled eyes wide with sheer revulsion and horror. "A job," she choked out, as if I had just suggested she leap off a bridge. "I cannot get a regular job. I do not have a resume. I have not worked since that stupid retail gig in college. I am the wife of a chief executive officer. People know me in this town. What am I supposed to do? Stand behind a cash register, serve coffee to my friends?" The sheer vanity radiating from her even while facing absolute destitution was genuinely staggering. Her primary concern was not survival. It was the perceived humiliation of performing honest working-class labor. "Your husband is not a chief executive officer, Kiara," I corrected her with surgical precision. "Your husband is an inmate facing decades in federal prison. Your friends are going to block your number the second they realize your assets have been seized. Your social status is dead. And yes, serving coffee is exactly what you are going to do. Or folding clothes, or answering phones. You are going to wake up early, clock in, stand on your feet for 8 hours, and earn a minimum wage paycheck. Just like I had to do for the last 15 years, while you were busy spending my college fund on European vacations and designer handbags. You are going to learn the actual value of a dollar by trading your own physical labor for it." Marcus tried to intervene, his voice shaking. "Zuri, please, be reasonable. Your sister is not equipped for that kind of life. She is fragile. She has never had to struggle the way you did. You are strong. You always have been. You can handle the pressure of the corporate world, but Kiara cannot survive that kind of harsh environment." It was the ultimate sickening confirmation of their twisted dynamic. Even now, standing on the driveway of a foreclosed home, my father was actively protecting Kiara from the basic realities of adulthood, while simultaneously acknowledging that he had always expected me to endure hardship. "She is going to have to learn to be strong, Dad," I replied, my gaze shifting from his defeated face back to my sister. "Because the bank of Marcus and Brenda is permanently out of business. You cannot bail her out anymore. You cannot shelter her from the real world. I am giving her the exact same start that you gave me. Absolutely nothing." I turned away from them, reaching for the handle of my car door. The wailing continued behind me, a loud, chaotic symphony of shattered entitlement and deep, unending panic. I felt a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders. I was finally truly free. Exactly 30 days later, the crisp morning air carried the distinct heavy sounds of physical labor. I sat parked half a block down the street, the engine of my Porsche turned off, completely hidden behind the dark-tinted glass of my windows. I had absolutely no intention of confronting them or offering a final gloating farewell. I simply needed to witness the absolute physical conclusion of the transaction. The massive brick colonial house, once the undisputed crown jewel of my parents' manufactured social standing, looked remarkably hollow. The heavy oak front door was propped open with a dirty cinder block. Parked on the cracked concrete of the driveway was not a fleet of professional movers in crisp uniforms, but a single battered bright yellow rental truck. The paint on the side of the box truck was peeling in large strips, and the exhaust pipe rattled violently whenever the engine idled. It was a glaring, public advertisement of their sudden catastrophic financial collapse. The neighborhood that my mother had so desperately tried to impress for 3 decades was completely silent. None of her country club friends came out to help them pack. None of the prominent church members arrived with casseroles or words of comfort. When the fraudulent money vanished, the fake audience vanished right along with it. I watched my father emerge from the front door carrying a heavily taped, sagging cardboard box. Marcus, a man who used to demand immediate respect simply by walking into a room, looked entirely defeated. He wore a stained gray sweatshirt and faded jeans, struggling under the weight of his own packed belongings. He shoved the box into the back of the rental truck, pausing to wipe a thick layer of sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. Brenda followed shortly after, dragging a large plastic garbage bag filled with winter clothing down the brick steps. The woman who once refused to leave the house without flawless makeup and expensive designer jewelry was barefaced, her hair tied back in a messy, unkempt knot. She looked incredibly frail, her shoulders hunched defensively against the harsh reality of her new, impoverished existence. But the most striking, satisfying transformation belonged to Kiara. My golden sister, the untouchable favorite, who had never lifted a single finger to help anyone, was awkwardly carrying a heavy stack of framed photographs. She was wearing cheap sweatpants and scuffed sneakers, her previously perfect manicure chipped and ruined. There was no wealthy husband left to shield her, no stolen credit cards to fund a luxurious escape, and no parents left with the resources to coddle her. She dropped the frames onto the metal floor of the truck with a loud clatter, sitting heavily on the bumper and burying her face in her hands in sheer exhaustion. My father barked a sharp, frustrated order at her, pointing aggressively toward the open front door. Kiara flinched visibly, stood up, and trudged back inside to retrieve more boxes. The toxic dynamic had finally fractured under the crushing, undeniable pressure of poverty. For 4 continuous hours, I sat in the comfortable, quiet, climate-controlled cabin of my car, observing the grueling process of their departure. They were systematically dismantling the museum of their own hypocrisy. By noon, the back of the rental truck was packed to the ceiling with whatever meager personal possessions the federal authorities had not explicitly flagged as collateral for seizure. Marcus pulled the heavy metal roll-up door down, the loud metallic crash signaling the absolute end of an era. He secured the latch with a cheap brass padlock. Brenda did not even look back at the house. She climbed into the passenger side of the cab, staring blankly ahead through the dirty windshield. Kiara squeezed into the middle seat, wedged tightly between her parents, forming a perfect visual representation of the suffocating trap they had built for themselves. Marcus started the engine. It sputtered, coughed out a thick cloud of dark exhaust, and finally roared to life. He put the heavy truck in gear and slowly drove down the street, passing right by my parked car, without ever realizing I was watching them leave forever. I watched the yellow truck turn the corner at the far end of the block, disappearing from sight entirely. The property was now completely empty, officially ready for the commercial demolition crew, scheduled to arrive at dawn tomorrow. Just as the silence settled back over the suburban street, the encrypted phone in the center console of my car began to ring. The caller identification displayed a private Chicago area code. I pressed the answer button, the audio connecting crisply through the pristine surround sound speakers. Zuri speaking. I answered, my tone sharp and professional. Miss Zuri, this is Richard Sterling. The voice of the lead investor from the boardroom echoed in the cabin. The Securities and Exchange Commission formally indicted Bradley Harrison this morning on 22 counts of federal fraud. We recovered a significant portion of our capital thanks entirely to your flawless audit. My partners and I have recently acquired 3 more highly complex tech portfolios, and we need the best forensic accountant in the country to scrub the ledgers. We are prepared to offer you a 3-year multi-million-dollar exclusive consulting contract. Are you available to fly to Chicago tomorrow morning to sign the paperwork? I smiled, the sheer magnitude of the offer washing over me like sunlight. Have the contract sent to my legal team for review, Mr. Sterling. I will be on the first flight out in the morning. I ended the call, resting my hands comfortably on the leather steering wheel. I looked one last time at the empty brick house that used to be my personal prison. For 33 years, they told me I was broken. They told me my dedication to my career was a massive flaw, and my financial independence was a curse that would keep me isolated. They poured every ounce of their love, their money, and their blind faith into a glittering illusion, desperate to prove that superficial status would always triumph over hard work and integrity. But the universe has a very precise mathematical way of balancing the ledger. The ultimate price of blind favoritism, arrogance, and greed is eventually losing absolutely everything you hold dear. You cannot build a lasting legacy on stolen ground. As I put my car in drive and accelerated smoothly away from the neighborhood, I realized the greatest reward for walking away was not the massive real estate acquisition, nor the multi-million-dollar corporate contracts. The true reward was absolute, unshakable peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to cut ties to protect your future and your peace of mind, let me know in the comments below. Please like this video and subscribe for more stories of justice, resilience, and reclaiming your worth. The story of Zuri and her family serves as a powerful testament to the destructive nature of blind favoritism and the absolute necessity of establishing boundaries. For years, Zuri was marginalized by her parents, treated as a disposable financial resource, while her sister Kiara was placed on an unearned pedestal. The crucial lesson here is that sharing blood does not obligate you to finance someone else's delusions or quietly tolerate their abuse. Society often conditions us to believe that family is everything, and that we must endlessly forgive and support our relatives, regardless of how terribly they treat us. However, Zuri's journey brilliantly deconstructs this dangerous myth. True empowerment comes from recognizing your own worth and building ironclad independence. Zuri did not seek petty revenge through screaming matches or social media drama. Instead, she protected herself through intellect, legal preparation, and financial literacy. When her parents willingly tied their entire livelihood to a charismatic fraudster just to maintain a superficial facade of wealth and social status, Zuri allowed them to face the natural, devastating consequences of their own actions. She teaches us that rescuing people from the disasters they deliberately create only enables their toxic behavior. Sometimes the most profound act of self-preservation is simply walking away and letting the math speak for itself. Her financial success and ultimate peace were not just rewards for her hard work, but the direct result of refusing to be dragged down by a sinking ship. We must learn to stop setting ourselves on fire, just to keep toxic family members warm, realizing that emotional and financial independence is our greatest shield against manipulation. If you are ready to prioritize your own well-being over toxic family expectations, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your own experiences with setting boundaries in the comments below.